The International Parking and Mobility Institute is pleased to present this shop talk titled Shifting Sands, Industry Outlook and Future Trends, Integrating Technology into Planning, Design, and Current Operations. My name is Kenny. I'll be assisting the moderator for today's shop talk. If you need assistance at any time during the program, please raise your hand or use the chat feature and we will assist you. Today's shop talk will last 60 minutes. Please feel free to queue up a question for us at any time during today's presentation. To enter a question to the shop talk system, simply click the chat and type your question and press enter. You can also turn your microphone and camera on, ask a question, or make a comment. All registered participants will receive an archived version of this shop talk in a few days. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderators and panelists, Terrance Gilmore, Marcia Alvarado, PE, and Maria Irshad, CAP. Speakers, welcome to the program. The audience is all yours.
Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate that. And welcome, everybody, to our first shop talk of 2023. My name is Terrance Gilmore. I'm going to be your moderator today, and I intend to be just that, nothing more than a moderator today, and pass this on to our wonderful panelists that we have joining us today, and I'll let them introduce themselves here very shortly. My current role in the world of parking and mobility transportation, I'm the Senior Vice President at LAZ Parking, which some of you may be familiar with around the country. In addition to my role as Senior Vice President, I'm also the head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for LAZ Parking. So happy to be able to join you all today, happy to be able to share like thought today, and would ask that you openly participate. We don't want to lock this down as a three-way conversation. We really want you all to participate in the conversation today, share with us any thoughts that you may have, any questions you may have to add to the conversation. We welcome that. We have 60 minutes here, and we hope to use them the very best that we can. So with that said, I'm going to pass it on to our first panelist, Marcia, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Terrance. Again, my name is Marcia Alvarado. I actually work for WGI. I'm the structural market leader. I represent the structural engineering vertical division in the East Coast. I sit in Tampa, Florida, sunny Tampa, Florida. And I'm also serving as a part of WGI's DE&I implementation. So I have organized a JEDI Council, which is kind of a group of people within our organization to help share ideas and figure out different ways to create a culture and an environment at WGI that people want to be at. So with that, I also help serve our business practice for structural engineering in terms of buildings, and parking is a piece of that pie. And so when it comes to design and construction of our communities, being aware of the inclusive nature of the communities that we're designing for and the people we're designing for are very important. And we try to provide a holistic approach to vertical infrastructure within the communities that we work in.
Thank you for that, Marcia. And Maria, would you like to share? Oh, I think you're on mute there, Maria. Oh, there you go.
You think Perfect. After like 2.5 years, I would have figured this out. So I'm sorry. Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Maria Irshad. I'm with the City of Houston, responsible for Park Houston. We oversee the on-street parking operations here. So that's all the meters, enforcement of the meters, collection of the meters, all the parking permits. And then we run a couple of other programs related to valet, news racks. We have a volunteer parking enforcement program, the residential permit parking program. We are responsible for maintaining and operating about 10,000 parking spaces. We are also an accredited parking organization with distinction. So that's a great achievement for our organization, and we're very proud of it. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with y'all today and kick off 2023 with a great shop talk. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Maria. Really appreciate it. Look forward to having the conversation with you today. With that said, Marcia, I'm going to kick off with you first here. I really enjoyed our conversations earlier around certainly DE&I, but just, as a structural engineer, your approach to our business and how you all look at our business and parking and mobility. One of the questions I have is, how can we improve the economic diversity of parking design and operations? I think you're on mute too there, Marcia.
Here we go. Yep.
There we go. Yeah.
When I think about economic diversity, the ideas and the clients that we've spoken to, really that conversation is driven around accessibility, and also how are these human beings that are utilizing these facilities functioning in their daily life. So for a lot of us here, we are on Zoom, right? So this is now, we've had to integrate and use this platform to kind of operate in our daily lives. But not everybody has access to Zoom. Not everybody has access to internet. Not everybody has access to smartphones. And so when we talk about economic diversity, we're talking about creating different platforms and processes within the communities that you guys are building these facilities. And what are those communities using? How are they operating? And I think that when we talk about cash payments, mobile payments, QR codes, and all of these different parking systems that have been implemented, there's a lot of technology experts. I am not the expert, so bear in mind, I'm looking at it from a holistic view where, having these citizens that are using your facilities, how are they operating? What's easiest for them? And what is it going to make it easy for them to want to utilize the space, right? The on-street parking conversation versus getting into a garage, but then also having access where that garage is located, and how they are walking from the garage into, a retail or an environment. So I think economic diversity is where I really think about, how are we taking those payments? Are we considering, all the citizens that are utilizing that space, and how far out do we go, right? Like this concept of like the 15-minute city, right? Like they're having to walk and park. If they're coming in from out of town, how are they getting around? And I think that who's using those spaces is very important when you're kind of driving the planning and operations of your campuses or cities.
I know you work from the brick and mortar side, and I know that you have a parking division inside of your company there. What is your interaction with them, and what are some of the things that they're sharing back and forth from you to them and from them to you?
So in our buildings division as an organization, we have a department for structural engineering and a department for parking. And so those two departments work together intimately on many different types of projects, from conception all the way down to the construction. And I think that when we are supporting a client about what the use of this parking garage necessarily is going to be, I'm interacting with that parking designer in terms of the layout, the functionality of that garage, but then also how does the structural engineering impact? Where you're putting your columns? Where do we need shear walls? That interaction between them happens very early on, to ensure that when we're presenting concepts that we know are functionally exactly what we want, we're getting all the spaces we need, or we're implementing electric charging stations or all of these other facets, that at least the structure is laid out in a feasible way. We don't necessarily do it in a silo. So we get involved very early on with our parking division that does a lot more of the functional layout, the conversations with the operations people, the technology in terms of what type of systems they want to utilize, what do they want to investigate. And so it's nice to be able to be involved that early, instead of just like, oh, by the way, here's the garage, and somebody who's laid out the columns may not have been able to do it in an efficient way. And I think that's one of the unique facets to our group. But then also being aware and learning about the technology is always something that I've been keen on, to find out how different municipalities and how different campuses are taking different approaches to the technology they use.
Yeah. So often from the operator side, I know I myself have done this. We're so often telling the structural engineers what we need and what we're looking for. If given the opportunity and chance, what would be some of the things that you would tell the operators that we should be thinking about as we're trying to get the proper use for our clients and our customers inside of these structures?
I think that, structural engineering is kind of, load moves from the top down. So for me, sometimes a building is synonymous to the market that it's in. But from an operations standpoint, I think one of the key things that we're always considering, a structural engineer wants those shear walls to be in there, but the architect kind of doesn't. And one of the big things that comes up is a lot of times visibility. So it's visibility within the garage in terms of for safety reasons. So sometimes we have to kind of mitigate that with a designer. And then the other thing is I'm sorry. The other thing I would consider is just the speed of construction. That is always a topic of conversation in terms of what's the product. Are we doing cast in place? Are we doing precast? What's the durability? And usually it's the maintenance of garages that always seem to come back and bite owners later. So the operations and maintenance, I think, is one of the things that you have to be aware of. And I think making sure that you have a parking designer that has experience with restoring garages is always a benefit, because you're going to be able to have the latest and greatest, products that you're putting in there that are cost conscious, but also, are going to last the lifetime of the time that you want to use the garage.
One of the downsides of Zoom is that you can't necessarily see me when I'm not speaking, but as you were talking, I was shaking my head up and down like, yes, I agree 1,000%. Maria, along those same lines, along those same lines, city planners are rethinking the urban landscape by the reduction or elimination of parking requirements. How does this impact curbside management in a city like Houston?
Well, I mean, it's a big impact, because as they city planners are looking to densify cities, right? They want us, Houston, city of sprawl. But for the past 15 years, they've been focused on building upwards. We've never had parking requirements in our central business district, but about a year and a half ago, our planning department expanded the no parking requirements to the adjacent areas, and the curbside has become that much more in demand, because we are, instead of having small storefronts and strip centers or small homes, they're now turning into mid-rises and high-rises in these areas. And they're, of course, the developers are still putting in parking, even though they don't have to, but the banks are going to require them to. But that curbside becomes that much more in demand as the developers are putting in these garages. They're now charging for parking. The curbside can no longer remain free. So we've got to manage it, which is why curbside management and the trend that we see in our industry now, it's become that much more important. I'd say like 15 years ago, when I first started off here in Park Houston, our goal was, let's make a place to park at the curb for a car, and it was a single occupancy vehicle. The curbside is now, the single occupancy vehicle is the least prioritized for that curbside. We are now replacing parking with bike lanes. We have dedicated bike lanes. We've lost hundreds of spaces in this area that is being densified. So we've lost hundreds of parking spaces to the dedicated bike lanes, because we want to promote those alternative modes of transportations. We can't keep supporting the single occupancy vehicle mode that Houston has been so well known for. So that curbside management and elimination of those parking requirements go hand in hand. We've had to develop new programs for our mixed use areas that are seeing kind of explosive growth over the past 5 to 10 years. And even though, we are losing parking spaces, we have transit only lanes. Now we have red lanes that are for buses only, which is new to Houston. We have built 400 miles of dedicated bike lanes in the past 5 years, with another, I think, 500 on the books coming forward. And a significant amount of those were in metered spaces. So we're losing parking spaces, but our meter revenue is not negatively impacted, because people find other places to park. We start managing our parking based on demand. So when we see the occupancy is greater, we're adjusting rates to meet that demand and manage that curbside a little better. We have put in a lot of commercial loading and unloading zones throughout, our urban core, and monitoring our occupancy becomes really important to being able to manage that curbside. So that technology and the tools to manage your occupancy, so what's going on at your curbside, becomes that much more critical as you see these parking requirements, kind of go away in some areas. Some cities are altogether doing away with parking requirements at this point. So it'll be interesting to see, how things keep moving forward in the future. But definitely single occupancy vehicles, and parking at the curbside is no longer a priority in the city of Houston, which is a big thing to say for an oil and gas city.
Today I'm operating and thank you for that, Maria. Today I'm operating as a moderator, but in my normal life, I am a private operator. So, working in large, dense cities, similar to Houston. What has the interaction been from private operators? How has that sort of worked out with the curbside management, with the addition of the bike lanes, with the reduction of parking spaces in the private operators inside of Houston? How have you interacted back and forth with them, if at all, to this point, and really trying to keep their businesses as thriving enterprises inside of the city?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Houston is pretty different from other cities in that we really don't have any off-street parking. We leave all of that pretty much to the private sector. So we've got a big parking operator, group here in Houston, and we do have regular communications with our parking operators here, not to the extent that, we're kind of coordinating together. I think it needs to improve. We definitely do better on large events, but the parking operators are seeing, I think they're still kind of suffering from the COVID impacts, although Houston was pretty quick to bounce back and get workers back in the office. We're still seeing maybe, I think it's 53 or 60% occupancy in downtown. So there's still quite a lot of parking that is available there. That being said, I know when I speak to operators, right now our meters operate from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And at 6 p.m., the streets are free. And so one thing that they have expressed interest in working with the city is to expand those hours of operation, because that would give them that extra benefit to, have those garages open, because that's one thing that we struggle with in downtown, particularly after 6 p.m. and on weekends, because we have a lot of people coming here. But when the streets are free, everyone is parking on the streets. The garages don't have the financial incentive to stay open because people are not going in the garages. And if, sometimes they can't even tell if a garage is open. So we do have some coordination with our off-street operators, but I think it could be a lot better, definitely, as we move forward.
Yeah, and from the operator side of that, what would you recommend to the operators to bridge that gap? What would you say to your operators? What do we need to be doing or thinking about for the folks here on the call in those instances where we could better those relationships?
Yeah, I think just regular coordination. We did this for a while pre-pandemic, and it kind of fell apart. But I think regular conversations just to know what's going on and what is the city seeing, what is the city working on? Because a lot of times the private operators don't, right now, we are surveying our curbside after 6 p.m. to look to extend the hours of operation. But we haven't reached out to any parking operators as much in our process. But now that you bring it up, I think that's something that I definitely need to add to my list to do.
No, we will welcome that. I'm sure the folks down in Houston will welcome that as well, too.
And they're all good friends. It's just, it's always been a very, off-street is private, on-street is public.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As we talk about, for many years now, there's been talk about the autonomous vehicle world and how that's going to change our landscape, not just in the immediate future, but over the next, call it 5, 10, 15-year cycle. While the time frame and impact for advanced technologies like autonomous vehicles or shared fleet services are unknown, can you share us what some of the municipalities like Houston are doing to walk that line of sort of maintaining parking for the current state, but also sort of planning for the future?
Yeah, sure. Interesting because, we are implementing a lot of technology. A lot of cities and universities and hospitals, for that matter, are implementing technology that is setting us up for the future, right? We're deploying smart infrastructure. We've got cameras, we've got sensors, we have payment apps, we have license plate recognition. We are focused on curbside management. We're providing real-time parking availability through parking guidance systems, and those systems can feed data to platforms to give that information to our customers. So, the things that we're doing right now benefits our current customers because it makes it a little bit easier for them to park, helps them find a place. They don't get frustrated or they don't leave a place because they think they can't find parking. This technology benefits our current operations in that we now are able to look at that data and we're able to gauge our occupancy and have a better understanding and see, what's going on at the curb because we're collecting all this information. And as we manage our digital assets, we can manage our assets digitally. We can resolve issues and respond to issues sooner. And then we can positively impact our revenues right now because we have that information that helps us look at rates, or maybe we need to extend hours, or maybe we need to do something different. So, all this technology that we're deploying right now is kind of setting us up for the future, but it's also allowing us to make more efficient use of our facilities and improve that customer experience. So, your customer is less likely to give up and leave the parking facility or leave the neighborhood because they say they can't find parking. So, all this technology that we're putting in right now is laying the foundation for, and who knows when we're going to see autonomous vehicles or shared fleet services, if that's going to be it. This is all unknown, right? I've heard 2040, I heard 2030. There's all kinds of different predictions about what's going to happen out there. But what we're doing today is setting us up for what we think could happen in the future. I wish someone had a crystal ball and could just tell me what it was going to be. But definitely, we'll also see this technology become more cost effective. So you'll see more widespread use, and as we get closer to whatever this new world is, and I'm hoping that it comes after I retire.
I love that. We do have questions coming in here on the chat line, and I do want to encourage everybody, please feel free to drop those in the chat line and we'll make reference to those. One of the questions that came in from Maria, what parking guidance systems and digital asset capture systems have you put in place?
Well, so here in Houston, we oversee all the on-street parking. So we don't have a parking guidance system, so to speak, because we have meters out on the street. But what we use is meter transactions to capture an occupancy that is not 100% accurate, because there are people who are unpaid, people who run out of time. So it's not 100% accurate, that occupancy, but it's pretty close to what we want to be able to share with our customers and what we also want to look at. We feed that transaction occupancy data to a platform called Connect Smart. Connect Smart is a trip finding app that our State Department deployed here in the Houston area. And so it's basically, it's an app that you download and you can put in, I want to go to City Hall, and it will give you all the options on how to get to City Hall, whether it's by the Metro bus, whether it's single occupancy vehicle driving there, whether it's a bicycle. It's integrated with Uber and other ride shares. So it gives you all the different options, walking. And that app will let the customer know what kind of parking availability is on our metered parking streets. But we use like Google traffic maps, red, green, yellow. So if it's green, you're definitely going to find a spot there. If it's red, probably should not go there. So that's how we provide our information to the customers for our on-street metered parking. Now, our partners, I have city partners like at the airport and at the convention district. They do have parking guidance systems in place, and they are also feeding that same information to Connect Smart as well as to other platforms. I think Airport has their own platform that they share their parking occupancy information to. So that's with parking guidance. And I know there's a lot of good parking guidance companies out there that we could probably go to the IPMI website and maybe find some on there. The other question is capture systems. So I just want to understand digital asset capture systems. Can you clarify what kind of system you're talking about here? Like, are you talking about a parking facility and the maintenance related to it, or? I just want to make sure I understand the question.
Question came in from Mr. James Waddle. James, if you're out there, you want to jump in, feel free to jump in the conversation.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. Just wanting to know how those assets using to collect those assets in one system and then push it how.
James, I'm sorry you broke up, so I hate to ask
I'm
you
so
to repeat,
sorry.
but I apologize. I'm sorry it broke up. I couldn't hear you.
My sorry, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but yeah, just curious about how the parking assets themselves are being captured digitally in that system to start with.
Okay. So you're talking about the on-street parking that we send to the Connect Smart. So we have a third-party data aggregator that kind of takes in all of our parking transaction history. It takes our citation history. It takes information from our license plate recognition systems as well that are roaming throughout. And then I'm not a data scientist, so I'm just gonna say it crunches everything. It aggregates the information, and then via API, it shares it to the Connect Smart app. And of course, we are happy to share that API with any app that we can get into.
Oh, sure. Who's the data aggregator?
We use Smarking.
Smarking. Thank you.
Marcia, I saw that you also dropped in the chat here that you have an autonomous project down in Jacksonville. You want to speak a little bit about that and what that is come into?
That's funny, Mario talking about the future, and I'm like, it's kind of here somewhat, little bit. I am not the lead on this particular project, but WGI is working with Balfour Beatty on a 2.5-mile Skyway autonomous vehicle strip through downtown Jacksonville. We're providing, full service turnkey with the contractor. It's with the Jacksonville Transit Authority. I'm the structural engineer on the ops building, so I'm not necessarily doing all the roadway and all the other work, but I am, just wanted to share that, it's a very unique project where it is integrated with Jacksonville Transit Authority and a lot of the development that's going on. Essentially, if you're familiar with Jacksonville, from the Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium, it's going to run east and west, almost like a corridor that has a loop with about 12 stations. It's partially is elevated, and then and it really is going to help drive a little bit more of how people are going to get around in that city, in terms of, especially for a lot of the private development and residential people that live in downtown are going to be able to move about. We're partnering with I believe it's Beep for the actual vehicle, but it's a really cool. I can drop the kind of one of our blogs in the chat so everybody can kind of take a look at it if you're not aware of it already. I'm sure the transportation world kind of stays in its own sometimes little bubble, so this may be common knowledge for all of you, but if not, I'll drop it here in the chat and you guys can dive in and if you want more questions about it, there are much better project managers and traffic engineers and all the people to talk about it. But it is really cool because it is another mode that we're providing for that city, and a lot of the conversations about where the place the stations is related to the development of where people are going to be accessing that. So maybe just more food for thought. And if you want more in details, like I said, I can definitely get you to the right players.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. As we approach now, what is, the third year after the pandemic or the beginning of the pandemic, however you look at it, in this new landscape, especially from the structural engineering side, what is your approach to the post-COVID era, and how do you plan to adapt more to this rapidly evolving landscape here over the next, you call it 12 to 24 month business cycle?
Oh boy. Well, for those that are in Florida, you obviously know that there is an increase, and even in Texas, these two markets are receiving a flood of human people that want to live, work, and play here. And so it's going to be, for the next 12 to 24 months, I think it's going to be about how do we sustain, the growth that we're having. 1,000 people a day are moving to Tampa. The rents are ridiculous to the point where I have engineers in my office that can't afford to buy a house. So it's gotten out of hand, but there's going to be a lot of new development in the land that is available in Florida. And so from our side, we're seeing a lot of development going on in the outskirts of these main cities. We are seeing a lot of large corporations moving their headquarters to Tampa, moving them to Polk County, Pasco County, the surrounding areas, which is developing a lot more housing and obviously all the different types of, development that comes with new residential. So we're hyper focused and trying to keep up with that. I think the other part is the city. The cities in the Tampa Bay region, just from here, are working really hard on sustainability and resiliency. There's a lot of push in terms of the resiliency of our land and being so close to the water. There's a lot of opportunity for government work to kind of help facilitate, the coastlines in Florida. So for us, I think we're going to be just trying to hold on to dear life over here. But I think I have seen more development in the last 3 to 5 years than I have since I went to high school here many moons ago. And so I don't think we're going to see a lot of downtick. There may be a slower growth mode, with meaning that the developers with a lot more capital, a lot more sustainability will continue to move forward, and the people with not so much cash will essentially, hold out. Going into the end of the year in terms of the economic decision makers in our industry. So outside of Florida and Texas, I don't know. It's an unknown world that it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
I'm going to hold that one for Maria for a second, and I'm just going to take this question that we have from Catherine Hebert. Catherine, if you want to ask it yourself, I'll allow you to jump in, and if not, I'm happy to sort of pass it on to, I believe, Marcia. I think she'd probably be best to sort of get us on track here.
Well, it's actually for both of them. So, Marcia, you had talked about, well, mostly for Marcia, because the first question you had, Terrance, was about economic diversity. And Marcia, you eloquently answered that question. But what I'm wondering, and I'm talking about my own experience in the municipal space, is are you as a private entity, along with the public sector, and Maria, you also mentioned that we need to do more communication together. Are you all reaching out to the community and doing more community development? Because in an effort to make municipalities more sustainable and looking at that access and that safe and affordable access, whether it be to structures or transportation or in anything else, because both private and public need to work together to make that happen. So I guess the bottom line is, are there systems and platforms in place to reach out to the public for input before anything happens?
Yeah. I will have to, speaking from this region, I think that they have been, the city has done a pretty good job. A lot of the development projects are being done in this, this public-private partnerships. A lot of the funding is coming from both sides. And I think when you have both public and private, when it comes to development, there's an obligation there to that community to make sure that they get it right. And so I feel like that the conversations and the planning side and the engineering and design side, there is a significant push to reach out to the public. The other thing I find interesting is that if you bring in people that live here, like live in this region, especially in a metropolitan region, like you're going to get a good understanding from the people who live in the region. And that's one of the things I've been trying to get the cities and the people to understand, is that pulling in consultants that maybe from someplace else may not understand the fabric of the community, right? I live in Tampa Bay. I live in Riverview. I work in Tampa. My family lives in this part of the town. I'm very familiar with all the back streets if 275 is backed up. Like I can get to anywhere I need to get to without the interstate system because I know all the back roads, right? And so I think the city has done a good job of reaching out. But I think that understanding and you touched on this in terms of affordable parking, the affordable housing is what we're really suffering right now. And I think that everybody's looking for the golden ticket, and there isn't one. But the reality is there's many different modes of method of construction. How can we get these things up? How can we get it being done cheaper? And how can we be more intentional about where we need this this housing and how it's going to be fully integrated. There's a very big project along the river, and it is a mixed-use income development on the West River. Related Group has been working on it and they've been working with the Tampa Housing Authority. They've been working on with the city, and it's a true combination of all partners kind of trying to figure out how to create more workforce and affordable housing that's along the water. That's like in your background picture, like people that can live right there along the water. And so they've created like a hybrid system. They're building it now, and they're in many phases. We're going to have to see how the public reacts in terms of like if they actually utilize the space. I am aware of one human being that got a call 10 years after they put their name on some list, and they moved into that apartment that development. But it was 10 years later. So the waiting list is very long. I think to the point where this human forgot about it, and they got a call, and they got to live 2 blocks from the river, and right in the very close to downtown Tampa. So we'll have to see how the public reacts and how they utilize the space to really know. But I'm grateful to start seeing some of those true partnerships happen and development actually coming out of it from it.
So here in Houston, we have very active community stakeholders, and I wouldn't even think about trying to make changes to parking without engaging the stakeholders that would be impacted in advance. So we have, parking committees in different areas where I have meters, and it's made up of business and residents in those neighborhoods. We meet with them on a regular basis. We hold meetings in the community, like evenings, so that they can come and listen to what our plans are and ask the questions, be mean too sometimes if that's what they feel like they need to do. But active community and stakeholder engagement is really critical. And it probably in Houston, just like in a lot of other cities, we've got neighborhoods that there's a lot of NIMBYism going on, and parking is used as a tool to, I don't want this affordable housing in my neighborhood. I don't want this new high rise in my neighborhood. And parking becomes that tool. So we get thrust into these arguments to try and, kind of try not to be used as a tool by the neighbors. So we have to, do some more education and talk more about what the curbside means and how that can be better managed. But definitely community engagement where we're doing changes in parking or configurations to the street, engagement with our community stakeholders. Houston is split up into super neighborhoods. So we have super neighborhoods that are, organized. These are just residents in each community, and they meet regularly. They ask us to come and attend their meetings, give them updates. So yeah, we try to be very engaged with our stakeholders. And of course, there's a lot of, business associations in the central business district. We have management districts that we coordinate with and make plans for in the future. So stakeholder engagement is absolutely imperative in the work that we do.
Thank you for that, Maria. Marcia, I didn't want, and we have about 20 minutes left here, and I definitely wanted to get this in because you shared a term with me, transit-oriented development. I found that to be, incredibly interesting. Just wanted you to share with the group your thoughts around that and diversity in that space and how you're sort of working in that space.
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic for a big part of our mobility and planners, in our organization. Obviously, when a project comes to me, I'm designing a building, but sometimes we don't need a building. And I think that sometimes we have to be intentional and mindful about that. So when our team communicates to us about transit-oriented development, it's really ensuring like like what Mario was talking about, all different modes of transportation are being thought about in a community and what people are going to be using. So it's thinking about where people are going to live, where they're going to work. Are people having to travel and commute? What does that commute time look like for them? What's ideal for them? I can't use Tampa right now as a really good example because there's so many people moving here. It's people having to live 30, 40 minutes away and commute, and the only way is to commute in. But that drives the conversation about remote work. And so it's like, you know, in this new era, we have seen a lot of hybrids, but we're also seeing people having to go back to the offices. And then some markets where, no, we're getting away from the market, or getting, excuse me, away from the offices. So you can sit at home and not have to worry about commuting, right? So I don't think we'll ever get back to one fully than the other. I don't think it's necessary. I think there is room for our entire, you know, all of the organizations and all the different markets to have, you know, diversity in terms of how we work. And I think that transit-oriented development is really focused on, if we're building a building, a lot of times, you know, we're having conversations with developers about high rises or mixed use residential, about understanding the curb is there's only so much room. So do we want Amazon to come 20 times today, or do we want them to come once? And if they come once, where are they going to store these packages? And are we going to build out storages within our buildings, and even a network inside the building to get all of this packages to the people? Because they're not going to change their habit in buying power, right? We're all here ordering one click button, Amazon, and I need a stapler, you know, whatever. I don't know. So how is all those packages are still coming, but we're taking up curbside all day long from people. So even thinking about the building design and how we're integrating sometimes some of that e-commerce, almost building like a mini distribution center, maybe even within the building, so that they're coming once for the day. Here's everything, and maybe it's getting disseminated. You know, those are the other types of things that we have internally, you know, within our group in terms of mobility, building design, and planning, which I think is interesting. I don't know if we may end up having like hamster wheels, like just shipping, you know, packages back and forth through our multifamily units. Who knows what we'll go back to, right? In terms of technology.
Well,
can I just add on to that? I'm sorry, Terrance.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Go for it.
So with transit oriented development, you know, here in Houston, we have a transit oriented development ordinance, and it, you know, it's on a light rail line, reduced parking requirements. And I think one thing that, as you know, managers of the curbside or folks in the parking business, you know, one thing that we should always be thinking about is the generational shift. I don't know if if y'all have 16-year-olds, but I have a 16-year-old who was really excited to drive, but all of her friends, none of them care to drive. And the new generation seems to be, you know, they want to live and work and play in an area where they can walk around. They can get around on their scooter, ride a bike, or take an Uber if it's a little bit of a longer walk. I don't know that maybe at this time in their life, they're not that interested in the picket fence and in the suburbs and commuting 30 miles out. So, you know, as the generation shifts, you know, I see here in Houston, like our pay by app adoption rate is, we get 80% payments on our payment app around the universities, which is astronomical for us, because overall we're at 22%. People don't, you know, it's a generational thing, you know, where how they want to live differently, how they want to get around is different. And I think that's one thing that we need to keep in mind as, you know, and I think that's what the city planners are looking at. You know, they look at the 20, 30 year, 50-year strategy of a city, and how is it going to change? And, you know, of course, living and working and playing in that 15-minute town, the 15-minute neighborhood that Marcia talked about earlier, that is, you know, so much better for our own health, for our environment, for our built environment. So it's to me, it's a lot to think about. And I don't know how I got over here from transit-oriented development, but it just, generational shift struck me as something that's really critical to, you know, you're building a parking garage. What is the life cycle of a parking garage? How long is it going to last? You know, what is this what are the boomers going to do? Gen X, Gen Z, how do they all want to interact with this facility, and what is their methods of using this facility? So it's a lot of big thinking, I think. That's hard for me to wrap my head around.
Your daughter's probably the exception, because I have heard many colleagues tell me that they are not interested in getting their driver's license at 16. Yeah. It's like,
that's
so this idea of having your own independence at that age, at least from my generation, 1982 baby. So whatever you want to, I'm like at the cusp of millennial and Gen X, but I feel like I associate to Gen X, so I'll leave that there. But essentially, yeah, there's this idea that the only way you can have your independence is to get that driver's license. And now I don't feel like that the younger generation is having that sense of independency. And I think a big part of that is because of access. They have access to so much information in the world, and they have access to make their own money without leaving the house, and they have access to do all these things that we didn't have access. So this idea of independence is not necessary at 16. And so the idea of driving, it's like that sounds almost like an inconvenience in their life. Like, why would I want to put gas in a car, pay car insurance, pay for a car payment, to have to drive it around? No, when I can just move about. And so I think your daughter is the exception, Maria, to get back in.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I guess I could speak on both sides of it, because I do have teenagers in my life, and, they sort of forget that somebody is putting gas in those cars and jockeying them around when they don't want to go and do it themselves. So there has been some reluctance in that way. I have nephews who are in their early 20s who I'm trying to encourage who still don't have driver's license, and they're still trying to figure that out for themselves. So definitely a different approach, because I agree with you, Marcia. My generation, which was a little bit before 1982, we don't have to get into that, but at 16, that was the first thing that everybody thought about. What kind of car am I going to have? How am I going to get there? You're bargaining with mom and dad to sort of help you get there. So definitely a different approach to it all. We probably have about 8 to 9 minutes left before I turn it back over to Kenny. And I really am interested from both of our panelists to hear, as we approach, 2023, we all walk into New Year's optimistic about our plans, what we're laying out for ourselves and our personal goals and our teams. I'm curious to know what is sort of keeping you awake at night for this year. And then what are the things that you're most optimistic about over the next 12 months of the business cycle?
Oh man, I think I touched on both of those. I'm scared. I'm holding on for dear life in Tampa. I think the keeping up at night, I think is this idea that there's a lot of people that are not able to, that are starting families and that are not able to kind of live in the city the way that they want to. And it's forcing a lot of people to continue to not be able to buy a home. And so that's been a big, and it's affected a lot of people, even right in my own office. And so it's heartbreaking to know that there's people that, are trying to build their family, trying to do it, and they're just not able to because of the influx. But that's also what is motivating, me, is the idea that, okay, there's a lot of people moving here. There's a lot of development happening. So I'm just trying to make sure that in every aspect and every opportunity I have with any type of client or municipality, to be able to share the trials and tribulations so that we can maybe find a solution. I don't have the solution, and I'm one of many folks, but I think that, actively communicating about building inclusive neighborhoods, being thoughtful and intentional from a holistic point of view is what's going to get the job done. We just need enough champions in our in different parts, in the transportation world, in the housing world, in the municipalities, to be able to kind of make decisions happen and the infrastructure to go up.
Real quick here, Marcia, have you found willing listeners?
Yes.
Who share that sentiment?
Yeah, I think in the private development world, it's a little bit harder, right? Because they're just kind of, a lot of private developers are looking to get the best bang for their buck, and they're here to make money, and we all understand it. But I think that's where a lot of our planners who have experience with the municipalities are kind of supporting and kind of being that kind of mediator, like, what can we do? What can we get away with to ensure that we're providing enough parking, or if we're, or we're trying to remove parking. A lot of our mixed use, buildings that have parking underneath, retail has been mandated in a lot of areas in terms of, to keep, that walkable city life. And then how do we, so the planners are kind of helping being that mediator between what we're willing to do, what we can do right now, and also being champions for trying to make changes, right? Actual, legislative changes to the requirements. So I think what's happening in our region is it's at an accelerated rate. we have to do it. Like we have I think COVID did that to us. If we were here and COVID didn't happen, it would be a very slow conversation and very slow actionable. I think what's happened post-COVID, because of the influx of people moving here, it's accelerated. So there's no time to wait. And I like to think that it's moving in the right direction, but some other people may be feeling like it's still taking too long. So
yeah, never fast enough, right?
Yeah. Right.
Same for you, Maria. What's sort of keeping you awake in 2023 and this early few weeks of the year, and what are you most optimistic about for yourself and your team this year?
So one thing that's kind of confused me throughout this whole like post-pandemic era is, we know that a lot of people are still teleworking. We know that office space is, in downtown, we've got empty offices or half full buildings, but morning and evening rush hour is still pre-pandemic levels. So I'm trying to understand where everyone's going and, what is going on in the morning that half of downtown, like my on-street parking revenues for daytime, Monday through Friday parking, you can see there's a big difference between what we did pre-pandemic and what we're doing now. It's not the same. There are not as many people coming. So where are all these people going? We have so many cars on the street.
They're having fun. They're doing things that they can work in the middle of the night and go out and have brunch on the next morning. Like
7 a.m. on a Monday rush hour.
No, I wouldn't do that, but yeah, I don't know. That's my theory.
But yeah, Houston is, when you were describing Tampa, Marcia, a lot of the things that you were saying, it's very much like Houston. We have resiliency issues. We're focused on our climate action plan. We're focused on building resiliency in communities, particularly the underserved communities. The mayor has a program here called Complete Communities, where we're trying to build these sustainable communities because they have suffered for many years from a lack of services that you might see in other communities. So Houston is having the same challenges that, what you're seeing in Florida. We got a big influx. Real estate prices went through the roof. And now we've got a lot of empty space in downtown. So what are folks going to do with that? There's a lot of discussion about affordable housing and how do we, convert some of that office space to affordable housing. Now that doesn't come under my purview, but these are, the things that
tell me about that.
Is looking. Yeah, we will.
Adaptive reuse is definitely one of the things that I think will be a future. If that's not a future trend that you've had people talk to you about, I think it will be. We've had so many different garages that we've converted and or had conversations with to how to repurpose structures. That's probably another future trend that if your campuses or your communities haven't talked about, I think it's looking at the viable options of what it would take.
Yeah, we had a developer here in Houston in 2018. Now, this developer was responsible for like big multifamily, complexes that were not, I wouldn't call them super affordable, but they were like mid-range. But as early as 2018, he was already looking at, his garages being built for that adaptive purpose so that they can reuse them in some different form in the future. So that was, 2018. I talked to him when they were already implementing adaptive resource in their garages. So yeah, definitely that is something that, I think cities are going to need to focus on, especially with the housing challenges that we face. And then when cities try to put affordable housing in neighborhoods, then the NIMBYism comes up. And I've seen projects as recently as 2 years ago or in the last, 18 months get killed because of NIMBYism, and that is another challenge that, city planners want to grow the city, diversify the city, provide that environment that is going to, help flourish, help people flourish. We have folks that are set in their ways and they don't like to see change, but y'all know that that's not news to any of us in the parking business.
No, not at all. Not at all. I know we have about 2 or 3 minutes here. Catherine jumped in with another great point here, and Kath, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that in these last 2 or 3 minutes that we had for the ladies on the panel.
For everybody on the panel.
Okay.
So I'm involved with Sustainable Connecticut. I live in Connecticut, and their mission is to help municipalities become sustainable in different ways. I mean, sustainability is a lot of things, and affordable housing, workforce development, health and wellness, transportation, and parking are huge. And so that is top of mind for our governor. And what I was trying to say is parking plays a big role, not only in the real estate component of it, and you all touched on all of that anyway, but also on the technology. The parking industry is it's like a leader in technology. So there's opportunities for partnership, but none of this is going to happen in silos. And I talk about this a lot. All the sectors have to kind of come together. There's infrastructure. There's all the community development. There's working together. So that's kind of my point. And I just brought it up because it's something that I'm so wrapped up in right now in different ways. And, so maybe Maria. I mean, Maria, you've been touching on it so much for Houston. Obviously, you work in a municipality, so you understand all of that. And Marcia, you as working on the private, and I don't know if that's indicative of your culture in that at WGI, but you certainly understand that.
Yeah, I don't think we figured it out yet. Tampa's, we kind of missed the boat 10 years ago when we had an opportunity for light rail, and we're suffering because of it for transportation. So we're trying to catch up. We may even jump a few steps. We may have to skip a few of the technology steps to get to the next thing because when it comes to the regional, so Tampa Bay in terms of St. Pete, Clearwater, Tampa, Pasco and Polk, there's a really big region, and they're not working together the way all of us consumers and people that live here want them to work together. There's no collective that has figured out how to be a collective and how to implement. So stay tuned.
Well, I'm hoping that
it's the one thing that probably keeps everybody in this entire community, not just our parking and mobility, not engineering. It is the one thing that every business leader in this market is talking about.
Well, I'm hoping that we can continue the conversation. I want to take the time to thank our panelists today. You were both amazing and shared incredible information with us today. And hopefully the IPMI will be our conduit to continuing these conversations and solving it. And I sit, like I said, in the private operator space, and, Marcia as a structural engineering space, and, Maria on the municipal side. All of us need to come together to make these changes and change it for the positive in the future. So happy to have had this conversation with you all today. And certainly, again, thanks to our panelists. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kenny, and let you sort of take it from there.
Thank you so much, Terrance, and thank you to our panelists. Just a quick couple of reminders about our upcoming Shop Talk schedule for the rest of the year. Our next Shop Talk is in, my Zoom bars might block it, Wednesday, March 15th, municipalities. We also have Shop Talk coming on EV, data, universities, and airports. So feel free to sign up. Pre-register is required and is free to industry professionals. So if you like this one, keep joining us for the next couple Shop Talks. Are you a potential CAP? Get on the CAP track. If you need help with your CAP application, where to go, what to do, the CAP track will help guide you to all the CAP information you need. So if you're coming at CAP, sign up for the CAP track, and I will see you when you're ready to apply. And last but not least, IPMI member benefits. If you're not an IPMI member, please get on. Our membership benefits include free frontline trainings, transitional memberships, our new member chats, our shop talks, access to our forum, significant discounts on all our education and opportunities to connect and grow in the industry. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for today's Shop Talk. We hope you have a great day. Bye, everybody.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.